I am here with Odas Nyonguru, CEO of Digital Umuganda and a member of the IGF Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Group. And he will be interviewed here today by Frida Naliaka from Royal Media Services, Kenya. AI, of course, is at the center of the talks here at the Internet Governance Forum and a big part of the Global Digital Compact that was adopted by member states this September. The Global Digital Compact talks about how we need to ensure that AI is used for good and for the benefit of all. And we are gathered here at the Internet Governance Forum, the unique global platform, to learn about the latest developments in digital policy. And of course, it's also an opportunity to engage with all stakeholders. I'll now hand over the stage to Frida and Odas to put a spotlight on the impacts of AI in the Global South. Thank you.
Thank you. Odas, maybe we could start with the policy network on AI, the IGF policy network on AI. Just a brief on what is contained in the document.
Yes, to explain a bit more about the IGF policy network on artificial intelligence, the policy network on artificial intelligence was first recommended by the 2022 IGF in Addis. And its first mandate was in 2023. That was our first year of work with the expert on the policy network, as well as a report at the IGF in Kyoto last October. And the policy network's work is basically looking at some of the key elements that are of importance in the global AI governance at the moment. Last year we looked at interoperability of AI governance, environment and sustainability. This year we looked at the same issues, but also added labor issues within the AI life cycle, as well as liability as a mechanism of accountability. Basically, what the policy brief contains is 111 pages of deep dive into those four critical issues, as well as key recommendations around each of those four sub-themes, and a main session about the reports that was published that happened on the 17th of this week, so on Tuesday, that looked into the recommendations and what could be the way forward into actionable work. As a policy network, what we do is come up with recommendations. Of course, taking it forward is up to the different stakeholders in the IGF ecosystem, including government, including private sector, academia, technical community, and civil society, to be able to make use of these recommendations.
Thank you. We are only 4 years far from the 2030, where we had a vision of achieving some of the goals in the SDGs. And here comes the intelligence era. So which are some of the SDGs that are likely to benefit from the intelligence era, and what are the SDGs that are likely to derail during this era?
So I think some of the SDGs will have a bit of both. For example, if you talk about decent work and work in general, I think when we look across the globe, there will be some job lost, but also there will be some job gained. Because if you look at, for example, in the health sector, where there's a shortage globally of doctor-to-patient ratio, with AI and its applications, especially in primary care and also diagnostic technology, this could amplify the work of the limited number of doctors that are there to be able to serve more people. But this will definitely need upskilling and reskilling of the current global workforce, especially for developing economies, in order to be able to gain from the AI revolution or the intelligence age, as you said. One other critical area besides work is, for example, education. One thing that we know is that there's a vast amount of information on the internet, but currently is not being accessible to the majority of the population across the globe because of, like the language it's in. 46% of the internet is still in English. With the help of tools such as machine translation, this technology could be accessible, the information could be accessible to a wide range of people, especially in developing countries where these languages are not readily spoken. The other area that will be heavily impacted is SDGs that relate to environment. As we know, AI and the compute and data centers that power the operation, the development, the deployment of AI, including the collection of the data, the training of the data, the storage, as well as the deployment of AI applications. All these heavily rely on a lot of compute. I think even His Excellency the Minister during the opening ceremony talked about this, and how this is going to, the need of energy is going to multiply by 9 in the next 5-6 years, so until 2030, and the need for this need for energy is one, going to create an AI divide, because developing countries already have a shortage in terms of energy production, meaning they cannot readily develop and deploy AI applications at scale. And second, the environmental or carbon footprint that will come with running these data centers that power AI will also have a significant impact on the environment. Actually, environment and sustainability is one key area that the policy network looked into this year, as well as last year, in terms of how do we govern data that relates to the environment, but also with the very high environmental impact of AI in the intelligence age, as you said. How can we, safely and sustainably develop and deploy AI applications at scale?
So you've talked extensively about the AI divide, because today it is only developed countries that have the capability to build systems, language models, and this capability is not in developing nations. And you find that this is likely to bring a disparity between the two factors they are in. So what is the solution towards enabling the continents like Africa to be able to build their own models that can be used in the continent? Because if today I'm to use services of a model, most of these models, generative AI models today, are premiums, and I may not afford to pay the premium fee, so which means I will not be able to use that model. So how can we empower development of AI solutions locally in our own countries?
I wouldn't say that there's no capacity of developing and deploying AI applications in the developing world. I would say it's limited. And I would decouple the problem in two key pillars of AI. I would look at skills, I would look at compute, and then I would look at also the research that goes very hand in hand with the skills, and I will look at the data problem. And then on top of that, then I would look at sustainability, but goes hand in hand with the compute. When it comes to skills, I think there is need for reskilling and upskilling the current workforce of developing countries, and it needs to happen at a very much faster pace. The good thing is that AI is diverse, so it can be applied in a lot of different sectors. So the capabilities of coupling, for example, AI researchers and health researchers in developing quick diagnostic tools for breast cancer or any other form of diseases can help leapfrog or fast track development of developing countries. So the key factor is to look how digital literacy and AI literacy is there for users, and also how to develop talents inside companies, so inside the private sector, but also a strong academia to do the research. So that would be how I would look at skills. For compute, there's need of additional data centers. Because a lot of countries, especially also in developing countries, have data localization laws, which is understandable. But then this needs to be coupled with local realities of data centers or GPU capabilities available in those countries. Meaning currently, if you have a data localization law and you don't have the necessary computing power inside your country, it means a startup or a researcher cannot develop and deploy an AI application today. And this is the role, of course, of different stakeholders, the government, to produce a conducive environment for such investments to be there in computing power, but also attracting private sector investment into building these data centers in the developing world. When it comes to data, the lack of quality data sets across many AI technologies is very significant and could lead to a bigger global divide. If you look at, for example, at language technology, Africa is home to the largest diversity of languages, over 2,000 languages on the continent. Many of them, I would say, are not digitized. As I said, 46% of the internet is in English, whereas only 5% of the world, I think around 450 million speak English natively and 1.3 billion speak it as a second language. So there's need to build quality data sets in African languages to be able to have access to information and use AI tools, but also the fact that even if you build these technologies in those languages, you also need a contextual understanding in terms of the data. For example, if you're doing facial recognition technology or any other technology, such as computer vision, there's some context that will come with data that is locally produced in developing countries. We look at large language models today. They have gotten better linguistically in speaking some of the key languages, for example, in Africa. But one of the key problems that is still there is that they might miss a certain context. For example, if you go to a particular large language model today and ask, I'm in rural Kenya and I'm feeling sick and I want medical attention, what can I do? I've tried this, and what it will tell you is go to your personal physician, which is not readily available in a lot of healthcare systems in Africa. So the healthcare system in Africa is primarily built on primary care, which is delivered by community health workers. So the missing of such important context in solving or these key challenges that AI could be able to solve is still there, and this is much attributed to the lack of quality data sets in Africa, but also across the developing world. Yeah.
Thank you. And in the policy network on AI document, the group has also highlighted some labor issues in the AI ecosystem. And recently there was a documentary by 60 Minutes which explained that workers in Africa were paid $2 in an hour to train AI models. Other than the minimal pay they received for this, there's also the mental effects that this had on them, because they had to brush through all this data and everything, and this wasn't looked into. So what are some of the policies going ahead that will need to be put in place to ensure the labor workforce is streamlined as we go towards the AI age? Does this mean organizations like the ILO has to go back to rethink now technological labor force?
I think what the policy network also looked at, and what I think personally is that when you look at AI, you need to look at the entire value chain. And some of the work or some of the labor force that's working on AI, or of which the work will be part of the production of AI is not technological labor. So it's not a software engineer, it's not a computer scientist. It's basically somebody in a mine, mining cobalt, which will power the data centers, which will power the servers that power the data centers that are going to be trained, that are going to be used to train AI engines. So when you look at the labor forces, to look at the entire chain, from the key pillars, as I said, compute, for example, has its own labor chain from how the materials that power these data centers are. When you look at data, what you're talking about is data labeling, which sometimes is not done by software engineers or computer scientists. So it might be done by just a native speaker of a particular language. It might be done by somebody who lives in that area, so might know that context more than anyone else. And also it goes up to the software engineers and AI researchers that produce and deploy these AI systems. So across all that value chain, there needs to be traceability of what got into the production of these AI systems and the development of these AI systems, and to be able to do an audit of if this was decent work or not, and to have the key guidelines or key metrics across the value chain on how to measure this, including the non-technical work, as I talked about, up to the research level and software engineering level that goes into this. Yeah.
Thank you. And we are here to develop governance policies on topics like AI and the digital field as at large. But there have been discussions on not to regulate technology too much, because sometimes regulation could lead to hindering some growth. So what is your take on that? How could regulation be done in a way that it doesn't scaffold the growth?
I think there's something very important that was there in this year's IGF, and it was one of the sub-themes of this year's IGF, which is harnessing innovation and balancing risks, and which I think is what we should be doing. AI can cause a lot of harm, but also it has a lot of benefits to it. So I think putting there regulations and policies that ensure that there is, AI is deployed safely, AI respects human rights, the value chain of producing AI is characterized by decent work. I think this needs to be there. But also it shouldn't be over-regulated to stifle innovation or stifle research. In some cases, they'll need for sandboxes to allow innovations to be tested at a very small scale and look at the benefits and look at the risks before it's deployed on a large scale. One thing that's there is that innovation is faster than regulation, so innovation will be always one step ahead. Now, having their policies in place or regulations in place on how these AI systems can be tested on a small scale and then deployed after looking at the benefits and the risks will be one critical thing. And I think one thing that we also talked about during the policy network is adaptive regulation. So as technology changes, there will need to be adaptation of current regulations or policies to reflect the new challenges and the new opportunities that these technologies pose. And that will be done on an iterative process. So it's not a regulation that sits there that will be, guiding for the next 10 years. If you look at the rate at which generative AI is advancing, including the first instance where it was introduced at a massive scale to people across the world, which is the introduction of GPT, I think was 2-3 years ago. Up until now, there has been a lot of innovation. I think I was in one of the workshops the other day where they were talking about how every 2 days there's a foundational model being developed and deployed across the world. So if that's the pace, then regulation will need to be very, very adaptive in order to be able to not stifle the innovation, but build a regulatory environment where this innovation can be tested and regulators can understand the risks, where the policymakers can understand the benefits, and where this regulation can be adapted to reflect the current state of AI as it goes in the intelligence age, as you said.
What are some of the most critical ethical concerns with the AI development, and are multiple stakeholders able to meet at the table and talk about it? How is it going when you try to bring in governance experts, CSOs, and people from the big tech? Is it something that will work? Will these three parties be able to agree on some of these ethical risks?
I think some of the biggest risks that have been identified with AI systems, I think the first one is lack of transparency. And so how does AI make the decision it makes? And this heavily intertwines with liability, because if different AI systems are communicating with different, with other systems through APIs, maybe through a quick loan application, there needs to be transparency and explainability in terms of how were the decisions made, and if something goes wrong, who will be liable. That's why I think some of the biggest issues that have been there with AI were basically this. I think a lot of advocacy has gone into having a human in the loop in terms of when looking at these decisions, how are humans being able to look at some of the outputs and be able to verify and validate. How can AI systems be audited? And that comes back to do we understand how they make decisions? Do we understand why they make those decisions? And what are the effects of the decisions that are being made? And in terms of how to go about it going forward, I think, as you mentioned, a multi-stakeholder forum such as this is really good, and the policy networks is a good example of such an effort, because you have people from academia, you have people from civil society, you have people from government as well as the private sector together looking at these issues such as liability, such as labor issues, and try to find solutions collectively. Of course, each stakeholder has their own role, and they will need to basically be able to collaborate in order to achieve AI safety in terms of development and deployment. But I think that forums such as this really present a great opportunity for different stakeholders to come together and be able to discuss the critical problems of artificial intelligence, its risks and benefits, and how basically the technology can advance safely.
Yeah, and especially in the media ecosystem, the biggest problem currently is disinformation and misinformation, which will largely be enabled by AI. And today, if someone is to make a message, an AI-generated message or audio, then distribute it on the internet, this message will get to my home, my village back at home. Then, in as much as the media tries to label it fake, to fact check, you find that sometimes these fact checking messages do not get to the people who received the wrong information. So, do you think digital literacy is going to enable our community to be able to combat misinformation right on their own, whereby they will know when they see something, their first instinct maybe is to doubt it first and not believe it as it has been?
Yes, I do believe that digital literacy and AI literacy is of big importance because the amount or level of misinformation and disinformation that can occur, especially in critical times such as elections, can be of big harm. I think on top of just fact checking done by let's say big tech companies or major social media platforms globally, there will also be need for legislation and policies and, as I say, liability if you're the author of something like that. If you're the author of an information that's false and you use AI to generate it, you should be liable and be charged in a court of law. Of course, that comes in with another problem, another issue, which is that the AI literacy is not only limited to the user, it's also the judges, for example. Do they understand how these technologies work? Do they understand, are there laws to punish such offenses? If the laws are in place, that means the policymakers need to understand. So I would say that there's a myriad of other reskilling apart from the technical people working on AI, including the policymakers that need to make policies to basically introduce liability if there's misuse of AI. The judges, so the judicial, needs to be able to charge you in a court of law if you have misused AI and have caused harm to an individual or a society or a country, or you have caused harm to democracy in general, then there needs to be consequences, legal consequences in terms of that. So I think fact-checking is and AI literacy and digital literacy is one step. However, liability is a good mechanism, as we said, to ensure accountability, which is one of the things we looked at is how can liability be introduced to ensure accountability.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a really insightful discussion. We're going to open up the floor. If anyone has questions from the audience, just raise your hand. Otherwise, maybe I can kick off with one question for Odas. How do we ensure that the African perspective is recognized when we talk about generative AI models? A lot of it is skewed towards like a Western perspective, right? But the Global South needs to have a voice. Can you tell us a bit more about how that works in the conversations you're having within this multi-stakeholder forum? Are there any solutions?
Yeah, thank you. I think the African perspective first comes from African countries having AI policies in place themselves. I think currently it's less than 10 countries. I think around 7 countries have AI policies in place. So understanding their own positions towards AI policy and AI governance in general is very important. And then the second part is contributing or collaborating in different processes and different, conversations that are going on globally about AI governance, and truly understanding what Africa is supposed to benefit from this and what are the risks that AI poses in the African context. I think the African Union and sister organizations such as the Smart Africa Initiative have worked towards this. I think there has been an AI governance blueprint by Smart Africa in the Republic of South Africa that could be used by different African governments to produce AI policies that are contextually relevant to them. So I think the first step is to ensure that every African nation has an AI policy in place. And the second is to contribute and collaborate in global discourse, such as the Internet Governance Forum or the Policy Network on AI, and basically look at globally the development of AI and the new challenges it poses in terms of environment, but also the new opportunity it creates in amplifying limited resources and their allocations.